So let's get her going, I guess. I guess first I need my notes. Because for a 3 hour and 40-minute movie, I ain't winging it. Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Blake.
And this is going to be a long movie.
A long movie?
A long podcast about a long movie.
Yeah, we make no apologies for how long this episode ends up coming out. This movie is 3 hours and 42 minutes, and for the most part, doesn't feel like that necessarily. But
they give you a little break here and there.
Yeah, literal breaks throughout the film.
Yeah, I actually kind of wish we still had
Interludes?
Epic movies like this with that interlude. Just to get up and go make a drink or some popcorn, get some popcorn in the theaters, whatever.
It definitely adds to the viewing experience for sure, and it almost makes it feel more live showy.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. Like if you go and see a play, often they'll have like that intermission in the middle where you can go up and do that kind of thing. Yeah, it's definitely a callback to that era as well, pre-film era.
Yeah. I wonder when they stopped doing that, because this was like one of the last epic movies, or even just a movie that long that was so good.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously make the comparisons, and we are going to make the comparison later, probably, to something like the Titanic or the Lord of the Rings series.
Even Gladiator is very comparable.
Yeah, for sure.
But nothing that was almost 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, the Lord of the Rings extended, so 4 hours. And they're a viewing experience worth watching. But anyway, this is our first of our 1959 VCR at the Oscars series. So we're talking Ben-Hur, one of the most critically acclaimed films of all time.
Won so many awards. Just crazy.
The record for almost 40 years before the Titanic comes out. And I'm extremely excited to talk about this. This is easily one of the most ambitious and epic films that I've ever seen, period.
Just massive and epic are just the key words for me, just how big this was. They went big on everything.
Yeah, the scale it'll put you in awe. And even for a movie that came out over 60 years ago, it still gives you that sense of awe. We'll talk later about what holds up and what doesn't, but suffice to say, almost everything in the movie itself holds up to today's standards.
Yeah. So we'll get into it. Ben-Hur is an epic story of revenge and redemption set in the year 1 AD about Judah Ben-Hur, a Jewish nobleman. His childhood best friend returns as a Roman tribute, looking for his help in bringing order to the region. Unwilling to sell out his people, the two split and enter into a clash of ideologies filled with character, drama, action, and violence.
This movie is this grand scope, and it gives you a good look into what Roman life was like then. And what I really love about this is, for a lot of the film, even though we're looking at the Roman Empire, we're looking at the Roman Empire through the lens of the conquered people in Judea and other regions, or out in the seas, the ships. We get a very different look at how Rome is run, versus a lot of other films that are about Roman culture centered around the elites of Rome within Rome and how their kind of dealings between each other works. Whereas in this, we get to see other perspectives at this time.
Yeah, and it's all kind of filtered directly through the characters. Masala is his best friend, who is just the prime example of Roman ambition and drive and belief in what it means to be Roman. And then opposite him, Judah Ben-Hur, he is just so ingrained in his culture, and he knows that nothing could stamp them out.
Yeah, he's a Jewish prince. He's obviously very wealthy, important in Judea, and so to have his best friend from his childhood, who very quickly we feel like you can feel the connection between the two of them when they first kind of meet again as adults.
Yeah, just like instant best friends again.
Yeah.
And then they also very quickly see the changes in each other after growing up.
Yeah. And where their lives have each pulled each other, and what drives them is very different as well. Mizal is a very ambitious person and is looking at Judea as his way to leave his mark on the world and his way to get the approval of the emperor and potentially even his family as well. His father was the governor of Judea, I believe, previously, and that's why him and Ben-Hur had that relationship as children, both coming from generally wealthy families growing up together like that. And that's, again, before maybe some of those prejudices start to develop as well, right? There's that childhood innocence.
Yeah.
And
that's what they remember and reconnect with in the beginning, and then it goes into all the differences, and like automatically Masala wants Judah to flip on whoever in the region, whichever Jews are causing problems for the Romans. He wants him to sell them out, and he's just not going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's all good. The other parts of the plot that I maybe wanted to just touch on again, like the perspectives thing, what I really enjoy is that we see Jerusalem at this time. You know, like you and I both grew up in religious families, more or less, and so we have a general idea of what's going on at this point, but you never really connect the idea that Rome and Jerusalem are very different places at that time. This is the first time that I ever really thought about that, and how different each location is, how even though they're so different and so far apart, they're so connected at that point in time.
Especially when you're looking into this movie, it's a tale of the story of Christ, but adjacent to it.
Yeah.
So that was super cool, because in the very beginning we see the nativity scene, and the three wise men go to visit him, and then we find out that one of the wise men is one of the characters in this movie, and then he connects with Judah later on, and so the whole story is set like intermingling with the same time period of Jesus.
Yeah, and that was the other part of the plot that I want to discuss, is that we do get this non-centered focus. Like Jesus is always kind of in our peripherals throughout the film, and we see him at different points in time. He's utilized as a force extremely well.
Yeah.
He's never really... There's only really one point in time where he's maybe pushing the plot forward per se, but he's just such an overwhelming force and such a big idea at this point that as Judah is interacting with different people in different areas of the land, he's constantly hearing of this Messiah, basically.
Yeah. And he becomes kind of a figurehead of his culture in the same right, like at the same time. Like he's kind of equal in a different way at that period throughout. So we see him like rise and fall within being this Jewish prince.
Yeah, and the film itself never really feels preachy or over religious either. You don't have to be, somebody extremely Christian or Catholic or whatever to get a lot of enjoyment out of this film. I absolutely loved this film.
Yeah, it's just like a really in-depth, I don't know. It's just really good.
Yeah, it's really good. All right, let's move into characters and people you may know. So obviously we've talked a lot about Judah Ben-Hur, played by Charlton Heston, one of the greats of the 50s and 60s. We've already watched a film by him, Soylent Green. We were both kind of lukewarm on that one, but he's also very much known for the Planet of the Apes series, which is one of my all-time favorite sci-fis. We see a very different character in Judah Ben-Hur than in Soylent Green with Charlton Heston here. Very different ideologies and mannerisms. He's somebody who you can be very empathetic towards throughout the film. Like, even when he's got the drive for vengeance, like, you can really like understand where he's coming from.
Yeah,
He gets pushed around for years.
Yeah, and he acts each part of it so well.
Yeah.
Like the rise, the fall, everything, his mannerisms and everything are so in tune with that.
Yeah. When he looks Mizala in the eyes and says, well, then I'm against you, you're like, ooh, like you can see the hatred.
Yeah.
So he's got a high moral character, those family values. He comes from a wealthy family. We already mentioned he's a Jewish prince. So that's kind of our scope of Judah Ben-Hur. Haya Harriet plays Esther, Ben-Hur's love interest throughout the film. She is an Israeli actress. She didn't have a large acting career, actually, really. So
not really,
there's really not much you may know her from. However, interesting enough, she was actually the last surviving member of the credited cast when she passed away in February 2021.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not see that. That's unreal.
Yeah, kind of interesting.
And I have actually seen her on a poster, like, just looking through old movies, for, like, as we have been, I've seen her, kind of, her face. It's the one, Journey Beneath the Desert. If you look at her profile, like that just looks iconic, almost like a Cleopatra or something. Cool. But she just is like very old school actress, like that whole vibe.
Yeah. So next, Mizala. We have to talk about Mizala, played by Stephen Boyd. Mizala is the son of the previous Roman governor of Judea. He's very passionate and ambitious about Rome. He's the military leader coming in, trying to bring Roman order to Judea, as well as being the childhood friend of Judah and the clash that they have there. This character is just unchecked ambition, basically. And
everything is for the empire and for himself. Yeah. And like it's the same thing to him. Anything that he wants is beneficial to the empire. He's just so driven.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if we've ever seen a more driven character in film before.
And he puts aside almost everything that's human. He just drops his childhood best friend like it's nothing. And he grew up in this region, and he just feels nothing for the people. Yeah. He won't give any mercy to anybody, and he wants to rule with fear.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it, because he has his idea of what Rome is and what Rome should be, and if you're not willing to get in line with that, he's just gonna walk right over you to get what he wants.
Yeah, and he plays it so well.
He does play it extremely well. I don't really have a whole lot to say about where you may know Stephen Boyd. He was actually in the film The Fall of Rome, which came out a few years later. We're going to talk about that one a little bit later, because that's kind of an interesting legacy for this film.
Genghis Khan. Yeah. He was in that as well. I don't think it was a big character, but that's another, if you're into old movies, that's probably one to check out.
Yeah, Stephen Boyd just has this look of like a Roman god, kind of. Like he's got like a weird, like chiseled kind of face, the butt chin that you would picture from like a Roman sculpture.
Yeah, and actually for the casting of him, Paul Newman, who from our previous movie, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, he turned down the role of Mizala because he didn't have the legs for Roman costumes.
That is such a Butch Cassidy thought.
yeah. Like he just has that comedy. But anyways, so he didn't play this, obviously.
Yeah, Stephen Boyd was kind of brought in late. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the effects and filming, I think. Unfortunately, part of the reason why you may not know of him is he passed away in 1977 at the age of 45. He had a massive heart attack. Yeah, so somebody that we may have gotten more of a little bit later in life that tragically was taken too early. Our next character, this is, I think, the last big character and person you may know that I want to talk about, unless you have another, but Hugh Griffith playing Sheik Ilderim. He's an ally of Judah's a little bit later in the film. He doesn't have a ton of screen time, but his personality is just so big in the film that he steals every single scene that he's in.
So memorable. And just, it's, no one else in the movie he wasn't necessarily comedic, but he brought a certain amount of like hope and joy and just
charm.
Like fun. Yeah, and charm. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, because Ben-Hur is kind of a stoic character, and Stephen Boyd is this unchecked, ambitious character with no moral standing, and they're just such big personalities. And then we've got Hugh Griffith playing like smug, rich, Middle Eastern character. The only thing that I really want to say at this point, this is the only part of the film for me personally that doesn't hold up, is the very obvious brown face of Hugh Griffith. I believe you said he was an Irish actor? Yeah, it definitely doesn't hold up by today's standards. It's very noticeable, but at the time, that's the way Hollywood worked. What are you gonna do, right? Like, we can't go back into the past and change. We can only move forward and be better. So, sorry,
you have another?
I have one other character. We should talk about Jesus really quickly.
Yeah.
Doesn't play a well-known actor. They actually never show Jesus's face throughout the film, and that's something that
they did intentionally, I think.
Yeah, they did intentionally.
And it works.
And it works extremely well. And he does never talk, or he does talk, but we don't hear it ever. It makes him feel larger than life, the way they portray him.
Yeah. And all you see are the reactions of, like, benevolence, the people in awe of him.
Yeah.
And he was actually, they found him while they were filming, or, like, as they were picking out sets or something. Some of the executives or whoever was casting went to the opera, and he was just an opera singer.
Interesting. Do you have another character do you want to talk about then?
In a certain sense, just that there's 300 speaking roles in this film.
Wow. I didn't read that. I knew that there was like something like 10,000 extras, which is in itself mind-blowing.
Yeah.
In today's films, you do not see that. Even with a film like Lord of the Rings, the amount of technical trickery that goes on to make this film seem like it's filled with people is very different from how they would have had to do it back then, because you can't CGI that.
No, yeah. Like in the 80s, like let's say the first Star Wars, that was a bunch of painted on things that were like put behind the film, and just to trick you into thinking that there were rows on rows of stormtroopers. But this actually had 10,000 people, like not all on screen at once, but at certain scenes there's like 1,500 actual actors on screen.
Yeah, like for example, the chariot scene, one of the most famous scenes in all of cinema. I can't remember how many thousands, maybe a couple thousand people in the stands there cheering, and
I think they said 1,500 per day.
Yeah.
Or per scene.
Yeah, just think about how ambitious that is to get everybody in costume, get everybody doing what you need them to do at the right time.
Yeah, and there's actually 365 speaking parts.
Which is wild.
Yeah, the amount of money they put into this.
It was probably one of the most expensive films at the time. I believe it was the most expensive film at the time. And
it saved MGM.
Yeah, they put their last 15 million into creating this film, one of the biggest risks of all time, but its initial release made 146 million, 10 times its budget.
Yeah.
It was one of those life experiences. We haven't had a whole lot of those. I guess the biggest ones in our lifetimes film-wise would be something like Avatar, the last Avengers movie. Like these are like
Spider-Man movie.
The new Spider-Man movie, most recently, the Lord of the Rings movies, stuff like that, like stuff that becomes a cultural phenomenon. Yeah. This was one of those films. This was a film that you probably talked about at the water cooler for the next 6 months, and probably played in cinema for those next 6 months. Yeah. So it's so massively important, and we'll get into the legacy a little bit later.
The director.
I didn't talk about the director, actually. Oh, yeah. Do you have something?
First, this is based on a book of the same name by
Lew Wallace's.
Yeah, Lew Wallace wrote the book originally, and he based it on he was involved in an intense battle called the Shiloh Battle in the Civil War, I believe.
Yeah, he was a Union general in the Civil War.
And he had a crazy life. He also was he was involved in the US speaking with people in the Ottoman Empire. But he's just like very
a legend.
He's a big guy in history. And he just decided to start writing after all of that. There's a lot of his own life stories influenced in the movie. But going back to William Wyler, he didn't want to do this at first. He didn't love the script. And it took about 7 years for them to get this movie moving. So he actually joined on because the movie 10 Commandments had recently come out and done well. Because
also starring Charlton Heston.
Yeah, and it's a biblical epic as well. I don't know if it's as epic. I don't think so, but
it can't be as epic as this.
Not as epic. Yeah. He hated the director of the 10 Commandments, so he's like, I'm gonna one up this guy.
Nice.
Yeah, and so he got the biggest pay to a director in history at that point, $350,000, which is like an insane amount for our time now. And he got 8% of like gross profits.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
there are points in time that the person and I that we were watching together was saying, I kind of almost wish that they explored this a little bit more, but they didn't have time to explore that because they had so much to explore.
Yeah, so what I'll say about the length of the movie is that basically we have lost we don't do that anymore.
The
where we
attention
actually,
span.
Whether it's forced on us by the studios or whatever, or if it's actually us who's not as interested in it, but we have like montage scenes where they could have just covered like so much of what happened to Ben-Hur in montage scenes, but they actually go into it and you see him become a rower in a Roman boat.
Yeah,
in the
galleys.
Yeah,
he's a slave in the galleys.
For 3 years. And so you have that whole thing, and that's a whole epic scene in itself.
Yeah.
And then goes to Rome, and he becomes the son of a
noble, basically.
A noble, yeah. High up Roman guy.
And there's all the discussion about how he becomes a famous charioteer in Rome.
Yeah. So we actually get to see a little bit more into those extra scenes that we don't normally get to.
And those are those kind of scenes where you're like, I wish I had a little bit more of that. But with an almost 4-hour runtime, it's really hard. And you got to empathize with the people who are editing this film down. This is one of the most filmed. I can't remember how much footage was filmed for this, but it was an insane amount of footage.
Yeah, and it was $1 million worth of just film.
Yeah.
So they went through a lot.
We've gotten a little off topic here, but
yeah.
Let's get into who this movie is for. So the movie itself is pegged as a religious epic. That's the greatest way to explain the movie. It's always Jesus is kind of in the peripherals throughout. It's during the time of his life in where the Roman Empire is. It's also just so epic on such a grand scale. There's so many big scenes. The scores we'll get to later is so bombastic, so large. It always just each scene from one to the next just feels so heavy, like so weighted, like there's so much happening.
Yeah, and it all feels very real. The sets are amazing.
Yeah. The costumes,
and,
like the color of the costumes and everything. Like that's one of the first things that I noticed is when the Roman Empire's entering Judea, the costumes, like the coloring. I was like, wow, this film looks amazing.
Yeah, the metal breastplates.
Breastplates.
Yeah, they all looked actual. Like they could actually protect. They weren't just fake props.
Yeah.
And there was actually 100,000 props made for this.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 million props, 100,000 costumes.
That's insane.
Yeah. And they all looked amazing. So besides that,
Yeah, and probably historically accurate for the most part. I didn't look into that side of things, but I'm sure they did a lot of research into that. We'll get into some of the historic accuracy of maybe some of the other stuff later. I think if you're a fan of the director's cut version of Kingdom of Heaven, and you've got to asterisk the director's cut, the original is, from what I hear, just choppy mess, but the director's cut, I think you're going to love this movie because it follows a very similar trajectory. It's about that kind of religion within this time of human existence and the part that it plays throughout people's lives.
And then the rise and fall of Gladiator. If you liked Gladiator, you'll love this movie. And just overall epic movies, really.
Yeah. If you're a fan of history, if you're a fan of the Roman Empire specifically, this is something that you got to see at some point in your life. And it's really interesting, too, because it doesn't paint a rosy picture of Roman life. It points a picture of through the perspective of the people conquered by Rome.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. One of our friends put this, when I said we were going to be watching Ben-Hur, he said, "Oh, you mean the Chariot movie?" And this is the Chariot movie.
That chariot scene was just absolutely unreal. The realistic portrayal of these crazy chariot races, it's similar to Gladiators in Gladiator.
Yeah,
like, it felt very realistic.
Well, and this is 1959. This is before the idea of CGI has crossed the minds of most of Hollywood. And this scene alone, the amount of footage that was filmed, the amount of prep work that went into this, the amount of work that went in building the set was, you could make an entire film, a documentary about that one scene alone. Which is incredible. So, yes, this is the Chariot movie. For me, this movie holds up extremely well. The effects are so groundbreaking. You're honestly going to constantly sitting there just wondering how they were able to do things the way they were done at that point in time.
They just did them for real.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And it looks incredible. Yeah. It looks better than CGI today.
Yeah. So how did they get those chariots and the 4 horses pulling them? How did they get them built properly to make them so realistic? They were almost exact replicas, probably.
And yeah, you said if fans of Gladiator are really going to like this, I've got a really interesting arc of how this film connects to Gladiator that we'll talk about in Legacy.
Cool.
I also wrote down Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie. Definitely heavily parodied something like this as well, and the time around that it's based in. I really like Monty Python, so I wanted to bring up Life of Brian.
That's fair. Film history buffs.
Yes.
Anybody into film history, obviously this is for you. It's on everyone's list. It's on the top 100 list of like all-time best movies. And it's one that I feel like a lot of film nerds haven't watched. Like us. We should have watched this before this.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a lot of movies to get through to have like a full expansive knowledge of all film, but this is one of them that has to be like higher up on your list than you currently have it now.
Yes, I 100% agree and stand by that. My friend who I watched it with was a film student and hadn't seen this before. Him and I sat down and watched this together, and he was in awe by the end. And he's somebody who's been critical of older films in the past, and he had one critical point, which I do kind of agree with, and we'll get into later, but that's kind of where, as a film student, he came in and he was like, wow, what a movie. Okay, let's talk when to watch. So, we've already mentioned this before. The film's runtime is 3.5 hours long. You need to be prepared for this epic.
Yeah, you can't just watch this on your lunch break.
No. And this is a movie that really should be shared, I think. Like, I watched it with a friend who I knew was going to love it, who's a big movie fan, a student of film. I think our other friend who mentioned as a Chariot movie, the reason why he knew of this is because it's his dad's favorite movie of all time. So this could be something that you watch with your parents or your grandparents, and you'll get maybe some memories too from back then and when they saw this, and maybe some thoughts and feelings that they had when they saw this.
Yeah, online I saw that this was a huge rerun around Easter time in the States. So a lot of people have memories of that being on, people who are obviously a little bit older than us. That was like every Easter they were just pumped for Ben-Hur.
This has to be like a 5-hour movie with commercials.
Yeah. Oh. Can you imagine? Yeah.
This would be like putting on a football game while you're having Easter dinner. It's
Yeah.
just kind of on. Although I will make the argument that this is kind of similar to something like a Forrest Gump, where you can probably turn this on at pretty much any point in the movie and get pretty into it at any point in time. There's just so many big moments that happen throughout the film and set pieces that you're gonna get hooked at any point, really. In also support of the long runtime, the film does have an intermission. It's about around the 2-hour mark. So you could break this into 2 parts. I think that you could definitely break it into 2 nights if you absolutely needed to. Mm-hmm. That's what Jess and I did for the extended editions of The Lord of the Rings, because those are 4-hour movies as well. Yeah. And they break it up. They have kind of an intermission because you have to put 2 discs in. But it felt like a good cutoff, and I think that this feels like a good cutoff point at where they put the intermission as well.
I felt like it was about 2/3 through, though. So, yeah, you could really get into it. The first act, you're just developing like the understanding of what's going on, and then second act you're getting more into like the build up, and then so you might, that being a cutoff time for that, you come back the next day having thought about like what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I could make an argument to watch it like that. It's almost like you end the first season of your favorite show and it ends on like not necessarily a cliffhanger, but something like big, and you're like, I need to know what happens next, and that's where it ends, and it's really well cut there. Because that's actually something that I was going to say is that, it's 2-hour mark. It's not quite the halfway point in the movie. It's past that halfway point. So really interesting and really well done. Where to watch? You have to currently rent it, unfortunately. I rented it on Amazon, and the rental version was fantastic. It's so clear. The score and everything comes through extremely well on there, so I would recommend viewing it through there. Okay, I think this is the spot where we cut it off. We were as spoiler-free as we could up until this point. Let's dive into things with a spoiler positive in mind. So if you haven't seen the film, I cannot recommend this movie enough. Yeah. This is something you have to see some point in your life.
Block out 4 hours or 2 sets of 2 hours, because you're going to need a little time to recover after the third or the second set. Yeah. Second watch.
Second act.
Yes.
Well, if you've never seen it, you want to watch it before we get into spoilers, we'll see you later. We'll see you in maybe a couple nights.
Yeah.
All right. Let's dive into things. Do we want to start with maybe themes first?
Yeah, I'm down.
The first theme is honor that I wanted to discuss a little bit, and it's the pride that Judah has in his people, and contrasting that with the pride and honor that Mizala has in himself and his ideology of the Roman Empire, and how those two ideas clash, and that sets the film in the direction that we go in.
I would say that they're both almost equal in that they have like the equal intensity, the equal amount, just with different weights behind them.
Right.
And Mizala obviously has so much weight behind him because he is the conqueror here. Mm-hmm. And Judah is trying to save his people,
and preserve his people and their ideas and their culture. Yeah, and Mizala, he's coming into a Judea that is already controlled by the Roman Empire, but he wants to leave his mark on the world, and he wants to be the guy who the Emperor of Rome comes to see and is like, you've done such a good job here for Rome.
Yeah, because the populace at this point are fairly rebellious. They're not, it's not all out war, because they've already been conquered, but they're not lying down.
Yeah.
They're not, and that's what he wants, and that's the vision I think that he has. Like, he'll get his full honor once the people are lying down, and he can present that to Caesar or the emperor fully.
So the next theme that I wanted to discuss was revenge.
Mm.
So, we get a little bit further into the movie. We have very quickly the relationship between Mizala and Ben-Hur fall apart.
Yeah.
Which happens relatively quickly. Like and actually very interesting here. In the original script, they actually didn't have that first interaction together where they have fun together.
Yeah,
it just goes right to where they fall apart.
Oh, okay.
But the director felt like they needed a little bit of something before that to see that they were, in fact, very close at one point in their lives. And that's actually a comment that Mike had when we were watching, was that, wow, like this relationship degraded very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Because obviously they didn't have one up until this point except for these memories.
Yeah.
And like Mizala is supposed to come over and see Judah's family and remember all the good times they had together. But that's spoiled quickly as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like you could see in that quick little first meeting, just like the two best friends from childhood, they throw the spears together and like they're just flooded with that old
nostalgia.
Feeling. Yeah, nostalgia. And
I think just about everybody can relate to that.
Yeah.
Especially now in these crazy times, like, you have these ideas of what these people were like when you were kids, and you grow up and you maybe grow apart from other people, and it's hard. It's hard seeing people in lights that you maybe didn't expect to see them in.
Yeah,
and disagree with.
It's like if one of your old best friends comes to you and is like, "Hey, I have a quick way to make some money." That's like how quickly it turned. It's like Mizala came in with the MLM scheme.
Yeah, that's a great way.
Because it happened quick.
Yeah,
but yeah. And actually, this is a little, since we're spoiler free, we're just talking everything.
Yeah.
One of the writers who was writing Mizala's parts, you already know this.
I know exactly where you're going. Yeah. I know we were going to discuss this at some point.
And I picked up on it quickly.
I picked up on it quickly as well. Yeah. I will agree with you.
So the writer added a little extra homoerotic vibes to Mizala towards Judah.
Yeah.
And they didn't even tell Judah's actor Charlton Heston, because he may have been homophobic. I think he has actually...
I mean, it's a sign of the times.
Yeah,
right?
it's
like,
a
we
sign
don't
of
need
the
to go
times.
into that detail.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, so there's a little... Like, there's almost like Mizala is a spurned lover.
Yes,
especially...
and it feels like that. Like, you're constantly like... Yeah, like, just, I don't know, the eye contact he makes.
How
like
close they are.
Yeah.
And
he just goes off in these, like, jealous rages.
Yeah.
And just does things where you're like, oh, like, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great portrayal.
And it's subtle, but it's not. Like, there's a lot to it where you're like, maybe. And it's not ever talked about or anything. It's just kind of there. Yeah, so that initial scene really set the rest of the movie where they are so against each other.
Yeah, that confrontation is again one of those memorable moments in movie history where Mizala looks Ben-Hur in the eye and says, "You're either with me or you're against me."
Yeah.
And Ben-Hur just realizes that his friend is not the person that he remembers anymore, and he says, "Well, then I guess I'm against you."
Yeah.
And that's how like they part ways.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah.
And
you could feel the tension in the air.
The intensity with which he, like, their especially Charlton Heston's facial expressions, they're so exaggerated.
Yeah.
And not over the top, really, almost.
Yeah.
In my opinion, but he just portrays, like, the depth of the emotion well.
Yeah. I agree. It's such a memorable scene, and when you watch it, you'll know what we're talking about. And so that revenge plays such a big role because Mizala ends up being the main reason why Ben-Hur is essentially becomes a slave, and his whole family is locked up, and he has no idea what happens to them for years and he's put in not even like a good slave household. It's not like he goes to Rome at first and lives in some nice home for some nice wealthy people. He's in the galleys of the Roman Navy.
Yeah.
And we see the amount of physical strain that something like that puts you under. And
mental, because we'll get into that scene in a bit, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes of the entire movie.
Yeah. So I wanted to just go back to the why he gets. So they part ways. They're not going to help each other, but they didn't hate each other at this point. They were against each other, but they were like, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. If there was nothing there.
Part ways here.
Yeah. So it wasn't friendly by any means, but they weren't hateful yet. And then the new Roman consul comes in after Messala just arrived.
Oh yeah, right.
Did you see the tile? Like when she moved the tile at first,
it was kind of shaky.
Yeah. Yep. So the Roman consul comes by and he's coming into the town where Judah has this mansion. His sister accidentally knocks off a tile and it falls on the new Roman consul leader, whatever his name is.
And he looks like he's dead.
Yeah, he almost killed him. So, and it was an accident, but then Messala takes it. Messala finds out it's an accident, but then he still has to enact the Roman justice.
Well, and he goes the extra mile as well, right? Like he sees this as punishing Judah for being against him, and yeah, like you said, he's also trying to get ahead a little bit, showing that he's this, hard tyrant leader. Yeah. And he's got a firm grasp on
the region
way things
and the people.
Yeah. So that's when we see Judah be sold into servitude, and his family's locked up,
and Judah gives his line of I'm not I'll be back, basically.
Yeah.
And Messala's like, man, nobody survives the galleys. You're gone.
Yeah.
And but Judah just keeps his faith. And
yeah, it's the faith, but it's the revenge. Yeah. He hates Messala so much that he has the will to live.
So it's a combination, I think, because he has that, but then on his way to being sold into slavery, he's chained up with 50 other slaves on their way to wherever.
Yeah.
And they pass through
Nazareth,
where they pass Jesus his
workshop. Store.
Yeah, his carpenter shop. And then the Roman guards don't let Judah have any water, but then Jesus comes over, gives him some water, and then you just see this drastic change from a completely disheveled
and defeated man.
Yeah, Judah, and then Jesus gives him water, and you just see he just becomes strong, and he has that faith and the vengeance, which is very old biblical.
Yeah.
The
Old Testament.
The Old Testament. Yeah, he's like, oh, I feel that. He's invigorated.
What a great scene that is too.
Yeah.
And with the Roman, the Roman, I don't know what you want to call him, slave captor or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you don't feed it, drink, or let him drink water. Yeah. And then he looks over at Jesus and he just melts.
Yeah.
In front of Jesus.
Yeah.
There.
He just sees something that he doesn't understand. He just turns around and leaves it as it is.
Yeah, it's Jesus as a force.
Yeah,
which is really
exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. And then he becomes a slave rower in the galleys.
Yeah, let's talk about the galleys a little bit, because again, this is one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, from the start of him in the galleys right to the rescue scene. So we see him in the galleys. The new commander of the Roman Navy comes to inspect his slaves in the galley, and he takes an eye, or he sees the will to live in Ben-Hur where he doesn't see it in the rest of them.
Yeah.
And
everyone else is just so defeated, and they're full on slaves.
Yeah.
But he has this hate in his eyes.
Yeah, and he's like, I like that. I like that in you, that hatred, because that will keep you living in this horrible place, and it'll keep you doing what I need you to do, essentially.
Yeah.
And then we have the commander push the slaves to near-death exhaustion.
Yeah. He takes them from regular rowing speed to battle speed, all the way
To
up
ramming
to
speed.
ramming speed.
Yeah.
And you just see them get way more and more intense. And there's other slaves like dropping out. They
Yeah.
can't continue. And Judah, he's just filled with this hate and vengeance and belief, and he will not stop. And so they talk later after this little scene.
Yeah, because we find out that there's an approaching enemy ships coming towards the Navy.
Macedonians, I believe.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly who, but
which was like happening at that time.
Yeah. All rooted in history. And he actually decides to unclasp Ben-Hur's...
Unchain him.
Yeah. Which is a really interesting thing, because you don't see that with any of the other slaves. It's kind of like, oh, like that was weird.
It's because he saw his drive and his faith, and so his name's Quintus Arrius, the commander of the fleets, and he sees that spark in him first when he goes through that whole exercise of the speed, like ramming speed and everything, and then he brings him into his office and he's like, I'll let you be one of my gladiators.
Yeah.
Or chariot racers. I'm not sure if there was...
It was a gladiator at that point. It was
gladiator, yeah. Yep. And so Judah was like, no, like I'd rather stay here because I might survive. I've been here. He finds out he's been there for 3 years. Yeah. Nobody else makes it past a year in the galleys. Yeah. He's been rowing for 3 years and still has that drive in him. So Quintus sees like there's something special about this guy.
Yeah.
And then Judah says like no, I'm not gonna be a gladiator and face like almost certain death. Here my God can protect me.
Right. Yeah, and it's really cool when he unclasps him, because you're like, oh, like, you know, as soon as you see that, you're like, yeah, if anything happens to this ship, these slaves are dead. Nobody's coming to unlock their keys. You're getting out and saving yourself at that point.
They're chained to their oars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and only the Romans will survive.
Yeah.
So they're going down with the ship.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really cool moment. And then we get the battle scene, which is epic, like the ship coming towards them and then crashing in. Oh my God. That, like, I was, I think, like, out of breath watching that. Like, that moment when the ship hits, like, I was like, oh my God, like, things are happening right now. This is huge.
Yeah, I was pumped. And especially the realism. I don't know how they did that. They're filming these things and they're so realistic, where each of these ships has like a battering ram on the front that just wrecks the other ship, and it comes right through the wall behind Judah, and water starts pouring in, and there's slaves everywhere, and there's fire, and it's just all crazy. And
the legions and the different navies are fighting each other up on the main level while the ship is sinking. Yeah. It's wild. This is one of the greatest scenes in all of cinema, in my opinion.
Especially for like how it's just all real, like real action.
It's so good. It's one of my favorite scenes. I did want to actually mention here, we didn't mention him earlier, but Jack Hawkins is the one playing Quintus Arrius. Mm-hmm. And he's underrated in this film, in my opinion. Like, he doesn't get brought up as much as Charlton Heston or Hugh Griffith does, but his character starts off as kind of an evil bastard, pushing these slaves to their limits and probably killing a couple of the slaves in the process, to becoming the father figure of Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
And maybe this is some sort of like biblical arc where he finds forgiveness. He tries to kill himself, but Charlton Heston pulls him out of that.
Yeah, after they escape from the wreckage of like the ship sinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I would say in line with that is that we see that not all Romans are the way that Masala is.
Yes.
Because in the office after, when Judah comes to his quarters and, he had the chance to kill him. He's like, why didn't you kill me? He's like, if I killed you, I'd be dead right now, too. And then, so they talk a little bit more, and Quintus is not, in all awe and belief of the Roman way. He doesn't believe anything. He's almost like a little nihilistic. He's more philosophical, more questioning. And so that's where that allowed that little wiggle room that allowed him to see Judah as something other than just a slave who should be conquered.
That's a really great perspective. Yeah, and then he becomes like that father figure. He adopts Charlton Heston into his family. He gives him a Roman name. And,
gives him his sigil ring.
And let's talk family as a theme here, because we've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but at this point in time, Ben-Hur can live a very comfortable life in Rome. He never has to see Masala again. He would inherit these great riches of a now respected war hero. He becomes a charioteer, a famous charioteer. He is everything in Rome, everything you could ever ask for, but he still decides to leave all that and to try to go and find whatever happened to his family when Masala locked them up, and to go and take vengeance on Masala for all of the things that he did.
Yeah. And he never, just as he didn't lose that vengeance and will to live in the galleys, he didn't lose it in the luxury.
Yeah.
So it just shows what really drives him.
Yeah, his resolve.
Yeah.
So he goes back, and he doesn't accept the fact that even though it's been 4 years at this point, that his family's dead, even though he's heard absolutely nothing at all about them, that he still thinks that there has to be his family somewhere.
He has to know fully what happened, and he still has hope. Hope is another theme.
Yeah.
It's a strong theme in this, where hope and faith kind of intermingle, but he always keeps his hope.
Yeah. Yeah, even in some of the darkest moments of the film.
And same with his family, because he does go back, and they survived way longer than they should have been able to in the dungeons of
Judea.
Yeah.
And they're deep, underground dungeons, never see the light of day kind of thing.
The door was almost they couldn't open it because it was closed for so long.
Yeah. Craziness. Yeah, and even as his family, when they've developed leprosy, they still believe that Judah is going to come back and that he's going to be happy and love conquers all kind of thing.
Yeah. We didn't talk about the romance side of this either.
No, we haven't talked about the romance side of this.
So right before Masala sends Judah away and everything, there's I've only seen one other Charlton Heston movie, but there's this classic Charlton Heston falling in love instantly.
Look?
Yeah, the look. And it's
like the white man's overbite.
Yeah. It's just so instant, and love at first sight, and it he's kissing her within a few hours in the movie, or in their time, but in another 30 seconds after seeing her, he's making out with her.
Yeah. What a great line that is. I'm trying to remember exactly what he says. He's like, if you
weren't a bride, I would kiss you goodbye.
Yeah.
And then she said, if I weren't a bride, you wouldn't have to.
Yeah. I wouldn't have to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very romantic scene. This movie has it all. And there's kind of even their relationship as it develops over time, and her faith in him returning, and her faith in helping his family through some really difficult times, when they have leprosy. At that point, when you have leprosy, it's game
You're
over.
cast
You're
out.
dead. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're cast
yeah.
out. You're sent in the film to the Valley of the Lepers. I couldn't find anything about the Valley of the Lepers. That was something that, as an idea, really interested me. So
Yeah,
I
and-
dove into that a little bit online. I couldn't find anything. I'm sure there was probably some sort of location where they all congregated and
because
just
they're all
tried to live
sent out
their
of
days.
town.
Yeah.
As soon as any leper comes into town, rocks are being thrown at them.
Yeah.
Like there was a blind beggar who wouldn't accept the money from them because there were lepers involved. And
Yeah.
the cave that they were in,
Yeah.
when he goes back in, is pretty cool. Like just imagine all these lepers in like a 4-foot height
Yeah.
cave. They're all like
Crouched
Crouched
over. There's
over.
little like fires.
trying to build little shelters. And
Yeah.
it's just an insanely miserable place. And they perfected that, and we barely saw it.
Yeah.
Like, we saw that, and you feel it.
There's so many themes to dive into. We could talk about the theme of forgiveness a little bit. It's less prevalent, I would say. Like,
It's the end result, and
Yeah.
I think it all comes from Esther. She is the one who leads Judah towards Jesus and his teaching. Like, her and Balthazar,
yeah,
who
the
is the
teachings
king.
on the mount.
Yeah. So they see, we actually see this. This was cool because, like, growing up Catholic and everything, just
Yeah.
to see someone else experiencing Sermon on the Mount, and you could you imagine being the one guy who didn't stick around to see the Sermon on the Mount?
He's walking away.
Yeah, you just see him walking away.
Yeah.
Judah's walking away. He's like, I got other shit to do.
Yeah. I did, that did stick out for me as well, because the whole scene, again, as somebody who grew up with that religion, and not being necessarily religious anymore, it still brings that sense of awe, that sense of like, wow, this is such this is one of those moments in history.
Yeah, it's an epic.
Yeah.
Like the Bible is a great epic.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see a different character experiencing the things that we've heard from the parables and stories in the Bible.
And it's in his peripherals too. It's not like he's not like
yeah.
following Jesus throughout the film. It's just like, oh
Yeah,
there he is.
Yeah.
Time to go save my family.
Yeah, and was it Pontius Pilate who called Judah the king of the Jews at one point because he won the chariot race?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we haven't got there yet, but we're already talking about
We're
it.
just all over the place. This like we could sit here and talk for probably 4 hours about the movie, right? So we're gonna just hit the highlights. But yeah, Pontius Pilate. The fact that there are just even other famous people from history in this. Like, as soon as Pontius Pilate was in the film, I was like, whoa, like, this is cool.
Yeah. And it's Pontius, but yeah.
Pontius?
Yeah,
like
Pontius.
ponchos?
Yeah,
Like if you were to
almost.
pluralize them?
Yeah, like punches, but with a little bit of an accent.
Pontius.
Ponchos. Yeah.
Here's your pinky for that.
Yeah. Anyways,
So dumb.
yeah.
So let's move on past themes. I think we hit the big ones that
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about. Let's do effects and filming. So the film itself is based on a novel from 1880, which we mentioned, by Lew Wallace. It was the best-selling American novel until Gone with the Wind was published in 1936. And then after the 1959 movie, it actually again surpassed Gone with the Wind for most sold book.
Yeah.
Most sold American novel, sorry. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to read it now.
Yeah, honestly, I would. I've read quite I probably got into older books. No, about the same time I started getting into watching all the older movies, and yeah, books are always better.
Yeah,
Movies are accessible, but books are always better.
Yeah, I'm quite interested to read this at some point. I'll do it for sure someday.
Yeah.
We mentioned this as well, the largest budget, $15 million at the time, and largest sets built at the time. So $15 million, I did the math, it works out to about $150 million in today's time, which is wild. Like, think about that. That's actually a pretty big budget. Like, that's a pretty big Hollywood budget at this point in time. And maybe we take that for granted a little bit, that a lot of big budget movies are coming out every year. But if you go back like 20 years, there'd be maybe one movie a year that would have a budget of like 150 million.
Yeah. And just like the figures for each like little thing involved, like it was $4 million just for the chariot sequence.
Yes. Which is only something like 9 minutes of the race itself is only something like 9 minutes
of this 4-hour movie.
Yeah, of this 4-hour movie.
But it's very important to everything in the movie. Like
it's easily the most memorable scene of the film. Like I was talking earlier about how great the gallery scenes are, but the chariot race again, I didn't feel like I breathed for 9 minutes.
Yeah, it was intense and a lot more brutal than I was expecting from that time. I thought it would be just like, oh, this guy bumped into that guy and he like screamed and fell. Yeah. But no, there's like there's people getting trampled. Yeah. And the chariots are getting flipped. It was basically like the craziest car chase of all time at that time, probably.
Yeah.
Not almost like to that level.
And some of how this happened as well happened like happy accidents.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting highlights about the entire scene is that the shot where Charlton Heston falls out of his chariot or almost falls out of his chariot was actually a stuntman who accidentally was launched into the air, and they cut that together because the stuntman was like, wow, that was so cool, we need to add this to the movie. And that wasn't an original idea in the film, because think about how difficult that would have been to film, because it was real. It was like, he was injured during that.
He cut his lip. He was the son of one of the directors or producers.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to say this.
Oh, I'm sorry. You want to talk about the last bit of it?
No. Well, what part are you talking about?
So they clipped that together with the close-up of Heston, and I rewatched it right before we filmed it, we started filming this. I watched it when I read that, and it's cut extremely well to that you don't really see the difference.
The transition, yeah, and it was just like I thought it must have been real, and the director, he actually thought his son was about to die. Yeah. Like he was like extremely scared because those horses trampling people is like, that's legit. Yeah. In the movie, they were trampling dummies, but the dummies looked real. I was like, how did they film this? Yeah. How did they get these all of these people like getting flipped and trampled and everything? They did it so well.
Yeah, not many films will make you ask, how is this possible that I'm seeing this happen right now? Yeah. Especially at a time before CGI.
Yeah, and the fact that basically, like, both of the main characters are doing all of the, like, almost all of the stunts. Like,
Boyd himself, they're riding. He did every one of his own stunts in the film except for 2, and I don't know which 2, but...
I don't think he was under the carriage when he got trampled. Yeah, that was
one of them.
But the person who was wearing, like, he was wearing, like, a full steel...
It was him. So he, when, at the end, where the chariot kind of breaks, and he's, like, holding on, that was him holding on to that. That wasn't a stunt person, and he's wearing, like, a chain-link armor to protect himself from that. Just crazy, like... To believe that happened, that somebody was okay with that. I can't imagine doing that.
Yeah. I think I would if I was in that situation. Oh, but like he's getting paid a lot, but he also died a few years later. I don't know.
Yeah, true.
Coincidental. Maybe not. But anyways.
Christ.
Story of Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk like the fact that they both learned how to drive chariot and
with 4 horses, like that real 4-horse chariot.
Yeah, they were trained to do that. And Heston himself picked it up very quickly. He spent 3 hours a day practicing for that scene.
And they built 2 of those the circuits. They built 2. One was one they used for filming, and one they used for practice. Okay. And the horses could only do like 8 runs a day, or like 8 runs a day. I don't know how many times they went around. Yeah. But so it took a long time.
And so, in contrast, Boyd, being brought on fairly late, had to learn chariot racing really quickly, which is kind of interesting as well, because Charlton Heston actually was a horse racer prior to this. So he kind of had that experience, that relationship with the horses already. I was watching a video recently with Charlton Heston's son and the memories that he has of his father. And one of his earliest memories is being on set during the filming and the practicing of the chariots.
Oh, no way.
He said it was one of his favorite moments with his dad, but he said it was one of his dad's favorite moments his entire life was learning how to race the chariots and doing those scenes. The chariots themselves weighed 900 pounds.
Oh.
Yeah, those horses were dragging around 900 pounds of chariot.
I could see that horses don't have a problem with that, but it's still insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Oh, another thing that I wanted to bring up, tiny little detail, was the in the boat scenes when the boats are sinking and he's trying to save people, he opens up the grates to where the extra rowers were below, and the first guy out, he is missing his hand and he has a bone sticking out and like he's all bloody.
Yeah.
It was like not referenced or anything, but it was just that little detail that just added to the craziness of the situation.
Yeah, that's something that I completely forgot about, but it was really distinct at the time.
Yeah.
Moving back, we'll get to the sea battle a little bit in a minute here. The chariot race, you mentioned that there's two arenas. The actual main arena that we see in the filming was actually carved out of a rock quarry, and it took a year to carve that out.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. And so it was actually modeled off of a circus in Jerusalem, and many elements of the arena itself were actually historically accurate to what the chariot race sort of looked like.
I noticed that so they're running around this loop, but in the middle there's statues.
Yes.
One of them looks like it's the Hulk. I think they predicted that. Or that's some flashback to the Avengers in like another version. I'm just kidding, but
I wonder if it's probably some sort of Roman god, right?
Yeah, but like maybe like Ares or something, but I just, it looked exactly like the Hulk. Especially in like Thor again. Dark World.
Yeah.
Like that looked like the Hulk.
Yeah, I'm going to have to pay attention to that when I rewatch the movie at some point. I'm definitely rewatching this movie at some point. This might even be a movie that you have to watch once a year. It's that good. I don't know if you could fit it
4 hours every year, that's like a lot of your life. But it might be worth it.
I watch the Matrix movies almost once a year, all 3 of them. So
yeah, I watch like the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potters way too often, and
this might be going into a rotation for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
I wanted to talk really quickly about the sea battle. I didn't find too much about this, and I didn't want to dive as much into this one as the chariot race, but they actually used miniatures in a massive tank to film those ships. But
the miniatures were still pretty big based on this picture right here.
Oh, yes, they were large miniatures. Yeah. Don't think that when I say miniatures that I mean like little wee dinky things.
Yeah, they were still like 20 feet long and like 10 feet high.
Yeah.
But they weren't the massive structures or massive ships that were like implied in the film, because I think it's when the guy Quintus Arius was taking control of the ship, he was like, how many rowers? They said I think 200. So
really?
200 rowers, and they were switching out 30 every whatever shift.
Right.
So 200 rowers, like those are huge ships.
Yeah.
And they looked massive.
Yeah. Especially when they got on the second ship after they've been rescued, and you kind of see that long shot down the ship. It really made it seem like it was quite large.
So the filming on that, just insane, because it seemed like real massive ships.
Yeah. And it's really well done. Like that shot in particular really stuck out in my mind. Like it was just a really beautiful shot as you see kind of the sun and it reflecting off of the water in the ship there. But
and as I was watching, I was looking at details, and the waves looked real.
Yes.
Like I thought, how did they film this again? Because like that's where they got me. It's like I was so involved that I noticed. I was like, how is this so real?
Yeah, I did notice that as well. Like the water is very realistic. It looks like they're out on the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. You already brought up the extras in the film, but they actually had 200 camels as well as 2,500 horses on film as well here. And maybe this is where we talk about the rumor and whether or not we can confirm or deny it.
Yeah, this movie is on a lot of lists for like best of all time, but it's also on one list of potentially worst of all time.
Yeah. Animal rights, essentially, is what you're talking about.
But mostly environmental and animal rights. There's like a list out there. This one may have killed 100 horses in the filming of this.
Yeah.
We're not sure.
We've heard the rumors before. That was something that Jess said to me when we started watching this movie. But trying to research it, what I found online was that it was actually referring to a previous version of the film, the 1925 silent film. I can't find anything online to corroborate. So as a viewer, if you find some solid evidence one way or the other, I'd be interested in seeing it.
Yeah.
But
because I saw that only 5 died in the first version, but 100 did in this 1959 version.
Right.
But it's disputed. Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So that's another little interesting historical thing.
Yeah.
Where we wouldn't allow this to happen today.
Exactly.
But in the past, like, horses were just part of the props.
Yeah, and I could believe that if the word got out back in 1959 about that would have probably changed some of the rules around Hollywood. And what you're allowed and not allowed to do with animals. Because after this, there are pretty strict requirements about how you're allowed to treat animals on film.
Yeah, whenever that came about, maybe this did have to do with it. I don't know. I don't know what people knew at the time. This is tiny. I saw a blue jug on someone's table, and it looked a little plastic.
Oh, yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
I did think about that, too. I was like, how did they get that in Roman times? How did that Roman jug come to be? I didn't look it up either. It is one of those things that does tickle your brain a little bit.
Yeah, like, if you're looking for things, you might see that.
Yeah.
One of my main notes was just, like, how amazing both the sets and the uniforms were. They were just so, like, everything was real.
Yeah.
It just blew my mind.
You were very quickly invested in the movie and very quickly, like, felt there.
Yeah,
The set and the setting really captured your attention.
And, like, this wasn't just a few sets that were nice.
Yeah.
Every set. And there were so many sets.
Yeah, because we start in Judea, we end up on the galleys, then we are in Rome, and we're at, like, the big, like, entrance into Rome where the emperor is sitting there watching his legions enter.
And then out in the like, almost wilderness, like, the Sermon on the Mount, the cave,
the Valley of the Lepers.
Yeah. And even just in Judea, there's, like, several scenes there because there's, like, Ben-Hur's house, and then there's Masala's house.
Yeah.
And outside of their houses, it's just, like, there was so much built. I think I read that there was, like, 1 million pounds of plaster and 40,000 square feet of wood used for the sets. It's just massive.
Again, it's unheard of at the time. That's what made this film so epic, is the attention, the detail, how much had going on. I think one of the only films that ever is going to rival this in that scale, and it's something that we have to watch later, is Lawrence of Arabia, which we've talked about in the past. I want to talk score next.
All right.
So, Miklos Rosa is the main writer, composer for the film. He actually scored almost 100 films throughout his lifetime. Very important in film. He had 17 Oscar nominations, mainly for older films. I did look through his filmography as well as his Oscar nominations, and I didn't really see a lot that stuck out to me that I knew of, per se, but maybe if you're a big student of film, if you like older movies, you might know him from those older films. He was actually more passionate about concert music than he was in scoring for films, but obviously he took this on. He won an Oscar for this. the way he developed this was he actually listened to a lot of Greek and Roman classical music and incorporated that into the film's score, which it's really a fitting score. It's very orchestral. There's a lot of, there's drums in some moments. It's very different throughout the film and very captures this big epic mood that the film is trying to capture.
Yeah, and like the rises and falls in every important scene.
It builds up the tension, and then it all crashes down on you. What I found really interesting actually about the score is there's no leitmotifs for the main characters. And what that means is that a leitmotif is essentially like a short reoccurring music or like a theme song almost that repeats throughout the film to represent something.
Represent like a person or like their feelings or like
it's
like
or a location or
like,
something like that.
Like Harry Potter has his own there's Hedwig's song and things
Darth
like
Vader.
that.
Probably one of the more famous songs of all time, like the da 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 da, like stuff like that. So this film actually, there's not a single point in the entire runtime where the film repeats any music. He wrote I can't even remember how many additional hours of music for this, and they had to cut it down into the film. Something really cool, this is kind of fits into legacy, kind of fits into score, is that the score of this film actually heavily influenced the works of John Williams. Who
did the Harry Potter and
who did Harry Potter,
so many.
Star Wars, like I said, Darth Vader, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
All the most iconic things.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of crazy because those are iconic things that kind of repeat during movies,
exactly.
But this guy didn't do
he just
them.
had so much going on that you could take like different elements for it and use it towards whatever you wanted to portray in your films.
That's fair.
But it's such a crazy idea that these films, like what we just listed, think about that for a second. Jaws, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Harry Potter. Name 4 more iconic films scores than those 4 films. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could name 4 more iconic film music.
Yeah, like off the top of your head, those are the ones you reference.
Yeah. So to think that those were impacted by this is crazy.
Yeah, from like 30 to 60 years later, like 50, in that range.
Yeah. So again, as somebody who's a fan of movies, just to find that roots and that legacy in the scores is so interesting to me. I did listen to it a couple of days ago while I was doing research. It's kind of interesting because we compare it to those, but I wouldn't say that it's something that I want to listen to or it's something that was stuck in my head per se, and that's kind of the reason why I went back to it to listen to it. By no means is it not a very well-written piece of music.
Now that I'm thinking about the comparisons, what makes a really good soundtrack? Is it that you don't notice it, but you feel it? Or is it that you remember it? So there's 2 camps there probably.
And I think as well, the fact, and this is why I wanted to bring up the leitmotif, the use of that, is that I think when you tie a song to a character or a setting or a mood or something like that, and you use it over and over again, it becomes very memorable. It's something that it's a callback. When you call back in your mind the memory of those scenes or those characters, you remember the music along with them.
So it's almost like that is essential for series or like multiple movies in a row, whatever.
Yeah.
But not for a standalone 4-hour film.
Yeah.
But there's probably like, if you were to dissect the whole soundtrack, I bet you could find a little bit. Maybe
There's
not.
There's similarities throughout, but it never repeats.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick look back at the times. What I wanted to see was what the big events were in 1959 and 1958 when they would have been doing filming. And what I actually found while doing this research is that the movie itself was on a lot of the list of big moments of 1959.
Oh, way. No way.
Yeah. The list was like, Fidel Castro comes into power in Cuba.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama flees to India. Ben-Hur was released.
Wow.
Yeah.
So not much else, I guess, besides those two other big events.
Yeah.
But yeah, then a movie.
Yeah. Wild. And again, looking around like 1958, 1960, I didn't see that for films the same way that I did with this, which was wild.
Cool. Huh.
So it kind of interesting there. I don't really have much else for a look back at the times. So let's talk legacy now. So this is really the height of Roman films in Hollywood. We're followed after this by Spartacus, Barabbas, The Fall of the Roman Empire, and Cleopatra. So Spartacus, you and I talked about this separately, and how the role of Messala was proposed to a lot of different actors.
Yeah.
Kirk Douglas was actually asked to take on the role of Messala. He denied it because he wanted the role of Ben-Hur instead, but they already had Charlton Heston. At this point in time, Kirk Douglas is in his 40s. He's a little older for the role anyway. So he says no, and instead he makes Spartacus in 1960 to compete with Ben-Hur. Another great film. You haven't seen Spartacus,
no,
yes.
which is amazing because this is like three big movies in a row that are all just created because one person was like, oh, I didn't get the thing.
Yeah.
Like the director didn't get the 10 Commandments, and so he made Ben-Hur, and then the actor that didn't get Ben-Hur made Spartacus.
That's probably honestly how Hollywood runs. It's just running on people jealous of other people's
everyone's
success.
egos,
Yeah. Hollywood was definitely
oh,
built
you made
on
that?
ego.
I'm going to make this.
Yeah. Yeah, so he made that. You haven't watched it, but I'll give you some comparisons, contrasts. I think that in terms of, what's the word I was thinking of? So runtime, Spartacus is a bit shorter than this. So the pacing of Spartacus, in my opinion, was paced just a little bit better than Ben-Hur. Like Ben-Hur, honestly, in the last 40 minutes, it slows down quite a bit. It felt like there was maybe a few spots where the film could have ended. Spartacus, from start to finish, was really well done. They both have very large casts, like very large extras. For whatever reason, with Spartacus, they used some set pieces that were very obviously like in a room while they were outdoors.
Yeah,
and that kind of, you notice it. It's noticeable. It's almost like if you watched The Wizard of Oz, and you could kind of tell that you're in like a set. You're not outside doing stuff. Yeah. And so some of those kind of stand out in my mind. Like it's not the cinematography isn't as strong. Yeah. But they both have their positives and negatives. They're both great films. So Oscars. The reason why we're watching this is for the Oscar period. Let's talk Oscars. So the film itself won 11 Oscars the year it came out.
Was it not 11 out of 12 possible?
It was something like that.
And so the 12th one was for writing. They couldn't nail down exactly who would get the Oscar for the writing, so they just didn't put in for that one. Right. They would have won all of them if they just figured out this one little thing. But yeah, at that time, from what I understand, they won 11 out of 12 of like the top Oscars.
Probably like the main ones too, right? Because there's kind of some
ones.
Offshoot ones that they wouldn't have been eligible for.
Yeah. So Best Picture.
Yeah, obviously Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor in a Leading Role, Heston, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Hugh Griffith as the Sheik, which is really interesting because the Sheik, again, he's only in maybe like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the film total. But
he's part of like the soul of the film, though.
Yes. Yeah. He's like the Timon and Pumbaa of the film.
Yeah. For our younger viewers. Yes.
Yeah.
But they have the new live action one now.
But anyway, best cinematography, obviously, as well. And then many more after that. This was the record for the most Oscars at the time until the Titanic came out almost 40 years later.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was the movie after that captured this many was The Lord of the Rings, which we've also referenced during this episode. What's really impressive, though, is the number of Oscars they won. At that time, like you said, it captured almost every single Oscar that they could have possibly won. Whereas looking ahead 40 years later with the Titanic, at this point in time, there's like double or triple the number of Oscars that you're eligible to win.
Yeah.
So this movie stands alone as one of the most celebrated films of all time.
Yes, but at the same time, there were less movies probably put out that year compared to when the Titanic was put out. If you're making that comparison, but it still stands to be like the most celebrated.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
That's a good point, though. Yeah. It's rated the second best American epic of all time behind Lawrence of Arabia, one that you and I have been talking about for a while to watch. Yeah. I really want to watch it. Like, I really, really want to watch it. But at the same time, we've done this big, massive epic from, like, this time period at this point. We got to leave it for a little while, I think.
I think so. I'm glad we did this one because it's been on the list. Like, so is Lawrence of Arabia, but I don't know, Ben-Hur, it was amazing. It
was something special. It was a viewing experience. There's also a connection to Lawrence of Arabia. I had to dive real deep into this, but Jack Hawkins, who plays Quintus Arias, is the General Allenby in Lawrence of Arabia. He's a fairly main character in that film as well, and that's kind of Jack Hawkins' his career in a nutshell. Is playing military generals in films. So, I brought this up earlier. Stephen Boyd was also involved in the film The Fall of the Roman Empire. He actually got to ride another chariot during that film as well.
No way.
However, the film, it failed. It did not have the same impact as this did, and it ended the love for Roman epics of the 1960s.
Wow. So he was involved in like the one that started it, or not the one that started, but the one that skyrocketed it. Yeah.
And then at the end as well. However, the film is really important to cinema because it was the major inspiration for Ridley Scott's Gladiator.
No way. Okay. Yeah. So I could see so many comparisons of Ben-Hur to Gladiator. The rise and fall in the beginning. He's a big shot in the beginning. Then he gets betrayed and gets sent down to the bottom. And then he works his way back up slowly. And then when he gets to the end, the rival Roman emperor guy cheats and tries to kill him. And then he still succeeds.
Yeah. Where the Fall of the Roman Empire, I think, is the major inspiration, is it actually is looking into Commodus's life.
Okay.
So there's kind of that similarity in, like, the exact time period when Rome that we're looking at.
Okay, cool.
So that's kind of where the comparison
I would love to see that just because of my love for Gladiator.
Yeah.
I've seen Gladiator a lot.
I have seen Gladiator a lot as well. Yeah, it would be cool to do a back-to-back of those two, now that we know what the inspiration of the time to them. But yeah, The Fall of the Roman Empire is not a cinematically revered film.
Yeah.
Sequels, prequels, reboots. Let's do that now.
All right.
So, the 1959 edition is a remake.
It is.
Of a remake.
Yes. Of a book.
Of a book, yes. The original is a 1907 short film. Let that sink in for a sec. It's a short film. I don't know what they captured in it.
No, yeah.
But for a 4-hour movie, while we're sitting there and going, I wish they dug into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Picture what a short film would have had. Which is followed after that by the 1925 silent film. Kind of interesting. I'm not a big silent film fan, so I don't know how to picture those. Or
I don't think we've gotten into them far enough to be able to. I've enjoyed parts of some, but I haven't. Like I've watched clips. I've followed people.
Yeah.
That, like I've like Charlie Chaplin or something
obviously,
like that.
Yeah.
But we haven't. I've never sat down and watched a full one.
Yeah.
But anyways, continue.
That's something else. We'll do it someday.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be a mainstay of this podcast by any means.
Yeah, it might just be a little clip. A little clippy.
Yeah. So since then, there have actually been 2 remakes since this movie. So I'll let you talk about the latest one in a sec here. There was actually a 2003 American-Canadian animated version.
No way.
That was 80 minutes. It was produced by and starring Charlton Heston in his final role in cinema.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
Yeah. It was a straight to DVD adaptation. Very interesting. I think it was more for kids at that point is what they were directing it towards.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would love to see like at least a YouTube video about that. I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but
go ahead, talk about the 2016 version.
Just basically all I know really is that it fell flat horribly.
It's kind of an unnecessary money grab. Like, with a movie with the effects as great as they are, the acting, the sets, the scenes, why would you ever try to redo that? It wasn't rated well. It was one of the biggest flops of 2016. I don't know why. I don't know why you do it in the same medium.
I don't know. What do you think? Make a play of it?
No.
Instead of the same medium? What do you mean?
So what I'm going with this is what I could see with the Ben-Hur franchise is being expanded into a TV series.
Okay.
I think that
similar to the Spartacus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because think about how often throughout the film you're like, oh, I wonder, like, I wish they explored that. I wish they explored, Ben-Hur's rise into the charioteer scene.
Yeah. Like, you could have a whole season basically where he's a charioteer.
Yeah.
Just like the intensity of it.
Yeah, or you just started reading the Brandon Sanderson book. Which one did I give you again? Way of Kings.
Way of Kings, yeah.
So you read the Way of Kings, and so think about like Kaladin's story arc where he's the bridge slave. Think about the initial like Ben-Hur being introduced into the galley that we don't see, and maybe he has some sort of mentor in the galley who pushes him to stay alive.
Who was his first commander, and like how did he survive his first year?
Yeah,
because that first year no one makes it out alive, and he has made it 3.
How does Mazzala rule in those years when Ben-Hur's not around? There's so many interesting things that you can do with a series like this.
And a little bit more of the Sheik would be great.
Yes, yeah, and maybe cast somebody who's actually Middle Eastern.
Appropriate, yeah.
I really think that you could do something along the lines of the Spartacus TV reboot and make it really good. I really want this.
Yeah, that'd be unreal.
This idea made me want to go and watch Spartacus the TV series. And you could, so the other point that I was thinking as well is you can expand on the relationship between Judah and Mazzala. You can have the flashbacks maybe here and there
to the homoerotic early childhood.
yeah. Exactly. But you don't make their relationship fall apart as quickly. You have kind of those moments of tension, or maybe they don't know that they're in the same crowd or something like that, and they're both taking different stances on some event happening and stuff like that. Yeah,
like I want to see more the depth of Mazzala's character. Like, how far will he go? Because he's gone pretty far, but we only see like small bits of it, really. Like, I want to see him like in Game of Thrones, the guy who like feeds people to dogs. Ramsay
Bolton.
Yeah. So if we could see his like how far he'll go into his Ramsay Bolton character, because between him sending Judah away and when he comes back, that 4 years, what did he do?
I've got an idea here. Is we're going back to their childhood anyway to see their interactions between each other.
Yeah.
Let's see his interaction with his father and how that shapes him into this Roman legionnaire as well.
Yeah. And
the homoerotic parts.
Yes,
too.
Especially that part. But yeah, and what was his time away like too? So there's multiple things to talk about.
I think you could really make a great TV series out of this. And you've got the books. The books are quite long as well, so you have the source material to make it. Hollywood, just do it for me.
Yeah.
We're giving you all these great ideas for free. We're not even advertising on this. You're welcome.
Just reference us or something.
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe pay us a bunch too. That'd be great.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. I don't think we're getting any of that money, but I don't know. Maybe
Unless
we can
we
see
make
them
it.
later. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how Hollywood works.
Yeah. All right.
At this point, let's say our personal reviews, partner factor, and then if there's any other great scenes, great lines, anything like that you want to talk about, let's do that and wrap her up. Go ahead. Did you and Annabelle get to watch this together?
No, we didn't. She's studying at the current time, and she got to see a little bit, but not enough to really get into it. I got into it though. I had to watch it in 2 nights.
Yep.
And that intermission couldn't have come at a better time.
Nice.
Because
my suggestion
perfect.
was right then.
Yeah, it was. I really like the intensity of the actors.
Yeah.
And the setting and the scene, like that whole time of like a Jesus adjacent main character.
Yeah.
That was so cool, but especially how he intersects with that time. And the action scenes, like the love scenes, whatever. The action scenes nailed it. The chic was great. Yeah, overall,
there's very little to complain about this
Yeah.
film. There's just so many great things happening. There's so many. Everybody brought their A game into this.
except for the love factor, I think.
I don't know. It was fine.
It wasn't central, so that's fine.
Yeah.
It was and it wasn't. It's just like...
His family was more important than
Yeah.
his love interest was.
And she became like family, and
Yeah.
like it was just the initial love interest was just like... It was just so quick. And
Yeah.
it was just like 2 50s romantic guys, super like awesome and in power, and the girl just swoons in and they're in love and they make out, and then that's it. I don't know, maybe it's just Charles Heston movies. I don't know well enough, but that's exactly what happened in Soylent Green. So
yeah. So I watched with my buddy Mike, and we both really enjoyed the film a lot. It didn't feel like overly long. Like, I never looked at my phone the entire film. I didn't look at my phone. I was so invested. Pacing of the film is really great up until the last little bit, maybe. And this is where Mike's had the comment of, the last 45 minutes probably could have been trimmed down a bit. There was 3 to 4 really great moments where it felt like it could have ended, and I could have been satisfied with the conclusion of the story, but I'm happy with what we got at the end.
yeah, the redemption through Jesus, and yeah, like the we didn't even talk about it. I knew they were gonna get healed at the end.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for it.
Does that dampen the film a little bit? Does it get a little too, like, miracle-y? I don't know.
I don't know, because I think
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a happy ending. I
Yeah.
didn't think we were going to get a perfectly wrapped up happy ending. And that's what I said, like, at one point when she lies to him and says, like, they're gone, they're dead. I said to Mike, I was like, this is what Hollywood's missing. Like, a complex ending that isn't perfectly tied up. Like if it ended right there, and he went on the rest of his life not knowing about that, like, I would have been happy with that, because I would have been like, like, he tried his best and he came so close, but at the end of the day, you can't take on the world and just win everything.
Yeah. And he did.
Yeah,
basically.
he got everything
Yeah.
he wanted. I mean, he struggled his whole life to get there.
Yeah.
But now that's
It
not to
could have
say this is
ended.
one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah, of course. We barely have anything to say because no one can say anything. It's amazing, but
Yeah.
it is a little old, but the love ideas at that time, they weren't developed well enough in film, so I think it could have been a lot better. I would love to find out more about if other films at that time were doing love like amazingly, but it wasn't in this.
Yeah.
And I'm not even into love movies. Why do I care about this? I don't know. It's just because
It sounds like you care a lot about
it's
this.
it's
brought
the
it up
only
before,
flaw.
too.
It's the only flaw, and it pissed me off because it could have been fully flawless.
That's fair. But you still have to agree this is one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yes,
Objectively
yes,
speaking,
yeah.
this is one of the greatest films.
It is.
It's probably going on my top 20. Let's add it to the 100 movies on my top 20.
Yeah.
So what lines you got? Let's hear your lines.
It's hard to get them exactly in an older movie sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, actually, before you say that, the one piece that I was going to add when you were saying it felt there was some old-timey bits is I think, now, I recently watched Spartacus as well. I think that the old ancient history works really well with older films. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the speech patterns of the 50s and 60s just works with my imagination of what they looked like back then. But I actually think that I would prefer to watch those movies I'm about to say it. I think it fits better than Gladiator. I think that the acting.
Yeah. The voices and everything.
Yeah.
Like the sound of it, the feel of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Gladiator. No, you get it. You get so into Gladiator, you don't even realize. But the accents are completely wrong in Gladiator, whereas they don't feel so wrong because they feel old.
Yeah.
Because they are old to us.
It's that transatlantic speech pattern.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? I want to see more movies these days, like recreating that almost perfectly, with all the flaws of it.
Right.
If you're gonna make an old movie, make it like that. Maybe not all of them, but at least, like, I could see it working well.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll get some sort of like Quentin Tarantino-esque actor or director who has that kind of
ability to bring it back.
Yeah, that kind of vision.
Yeah.
So now let's get into the quotes. Sorry.
The scene where Judah escapes from his initial capture and he races through the dungeons. That was the first scene where I was like really into the locations, because I was like, how did they get dungeon I wasn't expecting such expansive sets.
Right.
And then so that blew my mind. And then he gets up to wherever Masala is and they have their little back and forth.
The war room kind of thing.
Yeah. In their interaction, Masala is like, you have given me your help. You didn't want to, but now they will fear me.
Yeah.
That wasn't the exact quote, but that line was perfect, because after that, Judah goes into, God grant me vengeance until I return. Masala is like, return? What are you talking about? You're going to the galleys, man.
Yeah.
Like, you're not coming back. But obviously he was like feeling that like full on belief and hope and vengeance will be fulfilled right away. Like, he's like, I'm not going to stop. That was like where it all kicked off.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And actually going back a little ways, this is a quote that I wrote down, is when Mazala kind of grabbed Judah around the shoulders. He said, man, this is going to be just like old times. And I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah. The way I wrote that down was pretty funny. Best friends, nothing has changed, everything changed. Because that's how quick it happened. Like,
yes.
There's a little bit of nuance there, but there's not enough, really.
Yeah.
But they had to just get it across. Whatever. It worked.
Yep.
Fine enough. But, yeah, it just, like, that change happened drastically. And Charlton Heston's facial expressions, he's got this, like his skin is too tight to his face. Like, everything.
He's like a lizard person.
Yeah. Everything he does is just so exuberant. He's just, like, you, like, read everything. It's just so obvious.
Yeah.
And in that scene where, like, where they
part ways, when he's just staring at him with that intensity.
Yeah, that too. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and his jaw's kind of like
like,
I know exactly.
Everything's like tight. I don't know.
I know exactly the facial expression you're talking about.
Early on, there was the concept was spoken. I don't know it was the guy who Masala was replacing in the very beginning. And he said, how do you fight an idea, especially a new one? Because that's when they were talking about the Messiah that was
and the introduction
rumored
of Jesus.
to be around. Yeah. How do you fight this idea? And Masala comes in and he's like, I'll stamp it out. Like, there's no new ideas. There's whatever. Like, he's going to steamroller it. And with his ambition and the might of the empire, like all this belief that he has in that.
Yeah, that's like the first time that you're like, whoa, all right, Mazala, this guy is like not a great dude.
Yeah.
He's like, wants to be a tyrant.
Another great quote from Judah is you may conquer the land, you may slaughter the people.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about too.
The beginning of that line I was just talking about was you can break a man's skull, you can arrest him, you can throw him into a dungeon, but how do you control what's up here? Tapping his head. How do you fight an idea?
Yeah.
Especially a new idea. And then, yeah.
If you were not a bride, I would kiss you goodbye. If I were not a bride, there would be no goodbyes to be said.
Yeah, yeah.
So, while you're looking this up, I wrote down that the love scenes are very operatic, and they add to the epicness of the film, in my opinion. So you weren't a big fan, but for me, they did add an aspect to the film that I did enjoy.
Yeah, that's fair.
You may conquer the land, you may slaughter the people, but that is not the end. We will rise again.
Yes, yeah. Only 4 of the actors or people involved in this were from Hollywood.
Really?
Everyone else was international.
Yeah,
basically.
It was very well acclaimed for being an international mix.
Yeah, so that's something that we didn't even talk about or really think about.
I did mention that Esther was played by an Israeli woman.
Yeah, and the Sheik was he was Welsh actually. So
yes, he was Welsh.
Yeah,
you didn't. Yeah, you said he was Irish before. We kind of skipped over this. We briefly mentioned it, but for me, it felt like a really big moment when Judah was adopted. For something about that moment where he's adopted, it really stood out to me. It felt like a big moment in his life.
Yeah, it's like he had validation, I guess, that he could have been whatever he wanted. He could be Masala. Mm-hmm. He could have done anything basically through this drive that he has, and maybe that wasn't unlocked until Masala happened to him. But now he has this belief that he can do something. I don't know. What do you think?
For me, it was just like the love that Quintus had for Ben-Hur and the admiration and his character. Like, Quintus saw something in Ben-Hur that he might not have even seen in himself at that point in time. Like, maybe he believed himself, he got himself out of that situation, but I don't know, they had a really interesting relationship, and I really liked that.
Yeah, because as a slave, he had to be so almost inhuman in his vengeance directive. But then this Quintus Arrius showed him that not all Romans are horrible.
Yeah.
And that he tries to go back after and reason a little bit. He doesn't really reason with Masala. He's basically cast him aside, but he's not completely against Rome. It's just Masala at this point.
How great was it though, that final scene between Pontius Pilate and Ben-Hur, where Pontius says, I knew you back in Rome. I'm friends with your adoptive father. Yeah. But the minute that I go back to my throne there, I am an operative for Rome, and you are my enemy. Yeah. And I never want to see you again.
Yeah, if I see you, we'll kill you. You should flee. Yeah. Yeah, that was a great scene. I was hoping to get a little bit more of the Pontius and Jesus scene, but we've seen that every Easter, I guess, so it's not like we really need that.
Do you think this is one of the greatest portrayals of Jesus in film?
In the people's reaction to him, in a the awe factor, but I can't say that. I don't think I could say that it's the best. With I'd have to look into it.
Yeah, that's fair. In my opinion, I think that what makes it so great is he's not the central figure, and they make him more into a force. This is the one time where he feels big. He feels like he's the guy.
Yeah, he's impacting all of this real world stuff that is also impacting Judah. Yeah. And the Romans and everybody. It's know what? I could see how there's a strong argument for that position. Yeah.
Let's talk really quickly. Best Picture, Oscars. Do you think this deserved Best Picture?
100%.
Yeah. We haven't even watched the other film yet. I can already say that there's no way any film in 1959 could have surpassed the greatness of this.
We watched the trailers for the other, some of the other nominees, but this one, I can't see based on the storylines and the trailers of the other ones.
Yeah.
I can't see them possibly even edging in.
I don't want to spoil the name of the next movie we're doing for 1959's Oscars. What I will say, though, it's actually a higher rated film from 1959 than Ben-Hur. So...
Higher rated
on IMDb than Ben-Hur for 1959. It didn't win the Best Picture.
No, yeah, okay, that's fair, but did it stay... Is it in the top 200 films of all time, too? It has to be.
It's higher in the top 250 films.
Huh, okay, so for Best Picture, it lost.
Didn't even get nominated for Best Picture.
Oh, okay, huh. Did it turn into a cult classic?
It's a classic.
It is a classic. Everything's a classic back then.
Everything's a classic if it gets old enough.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm excited. I don't even remember what one it was because I should know, but I'm excited as if I'm a listener.
Yeah, I'm very excited to compare and contrast. And watching this is why we watched this one first, too, is because we knew that this one won Best Picture. We wanted to see what the standard was for Best Picture in 1959. I want to watch 1955 to 1965 and compare the Best Pictures in all of these years, because I don't think you can beat this. Like, I really don't think in that 10-year span that this film has beaten either the 5 years before or the 5 years after. This is something special, cinematically. But... we've got this other movie. It didn't win any Oscars, but it's better rated than Ben-Hur. So
I can see a better story.
Yeah, maybe.
My guess is that it's a better storyline and it flows just perfectly or something like that.
Yeah, the runtime's like a crisp 2 hours, something like that. The pacing's...
like, it couldn't have beat Best Picture because of all the... like the set and the setting and the
scope.
Yeah, the scope of Ben-Hur is just astronomical compared to anything. Another story being better and maybe actors who were a little more genuine.
And maybe the other thing is here, because we're gonna let's speculate a little bit. I wonder if the other film is more accessible and more easily rewatchable. Maybe it just, it has that better runtime. It's got maybe some really great moments that you want to see over and over again. So that's my thoughts there. I'm really glad that we watched this one first because I'm going in a little bit critical of the other one, knowing how great this one is. And I'm really interested to see what my thoughts are. And maybe, you know what? Maybe the other film is objectively better. Like, maybe, like you said, the story's crisper, the acting's a little bit better. But
maybe it's more novel, like a concept that hadn't been seen yet. Whereas this is it's almost a Bible story. It's like its tagline is a story of the Christ, or whatever. So,
shall we leave it there? Leave our audience guessing of what the next movie is going to be for the 1959 Oscars series?
Yeah, let's do it. It's just like the wait for the Oscars to be announced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more excited about the 1959 Oscars right now than I am about the 2022 Oscars.
Yeah, me too.
Hope everyone enjoyed the podcast. I had an absolute blast. I cannot recommend this movie enough. Please, if you are a fan of films, watch this. Give yourself the 3.5 hours of time and watch this. Maybe 4 hours because you're going to need a pee break. Although there's an intermission for that.
Yeah, there's like a 10-minute intermission.
Yeah.
Some good music there. You could pee to that.
Yeah.
If you can hear it from your living room. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have
right.
a good one. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Keep listening.
Please keep listening.